Hey, everybody. Welcome to Fresh Take from What Fresh Hell, Laughing in the Face of Motherhood. This is Amy. Today, I'm talking to Nancy Reddy. She is the author of the new book, The Good Mother Myth, which uncovers the shoddy science beneath our bad ideas about how to be a good mom. Nancy thinks you're already doing great. Welcome, Nancy.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
This is like people who listen to this podcast will know what I say when they say this is such an Amy book, and it braids together research and studies, and even better, like querying those studies. And you thought that the study said this, or when you really look, it says that. I love that. And also your personal story. And it braids the two together really successfully. And I was wondering if you could start by just telling us how did you come up with that sort of concept for the book, and was that easy or hard to accomplish?
I mean, it was very, very hard.
Mhm.
I first started working on this book when my kids were like 3 and 5, I think, and I kind of came up out of the real haze and exhaustion of early motherhood
Yeah.
and just kind of looked around like, what happened to me? Like, what was that? Um, and I'm a huge reader, I'm a writer, I'm a researcher, I think, like both by temperament and by training. And I found myself reading like a ton of motherhood memoirs to be like, what were other people's experiences like? And there were a lot that I loved, but none really fully answered my questions. Like, why, if this thing is like the most natural thing in the world, like, why had it been so hard for me?
Right.
And so that really required research and required, as you say, like unpacking, what's the origin of these ideas? And, if science says these things about what it means to be a good mom or what your baby needs for you, like what actually is that science? And like, let's unpack that a little bit because it's not quite as conclusive, I think, as we feel like it is.
And at the center of this good mother myth, it's a complete contradiction that you brought to this new part of your life, as did I, that motherhood was both the most natural thing in the world and something that could be done correctly.
Yes.
Perfectly,
Yes.
if you read enough
Yeah.
books and consulted
Yeah,
enough
exactly,
experts.
right? Like, there's this, like, studying component to it, I
Mhm.
can study up to be a good mom in the same way that, that kind of approach has served me so well in my life as a student and my life as a professional. I think that's an approach that we're really encouraged to take, there's a
Absolutely.
whole industry of books and experts that wanna tell you what to do.
Right, right, and you say, I'm quoting you here, "I believed I could handle any challenge if I worked hard enough and read the right books." That is yes, that is also me, and I mean, to be fair, that kinda works if you're in law school, right? It kind of works at other
Yes.
things in your life,
Yeah.
and
It's an
then
excellent strategy in other places.
right, and then you become a mom, and what happened? What happened for you as a new
Oh,
parent?
man. I mean, nothing that I thought was gonna happen, right? Like, I took my breastfeeding class, and then I got home with the baby that, it was a struggle, and I knew all of the rules about safe sleep, and I, could not get my baby to nap. It just really shook my sense of myself as being good at things because I had this little person now who did not wanna go along with my plans, did not share my vision of what our day was going to be, which I think really highlights, the difference between, say, going to law school or going to doing a PhD program, which I was doing at the time, and, mothering or caregiving, which is that you're engaged with another person. I think that all of those rule and my faith in, experts and research got in the way of my understanding that this is another person. This is a relationship, and my job here is not to get him to follow a schedule, but to get to know him and to, learn together how to do this. But it was tough. It was a really tough first couple of months.
And you and I had that in common as well. My first child was similar to yours, screamed constantly. Nothing worked. Nothing
Yeah.
I knew how to do worked. Nothing that I was reading about worked. And then you underlined in the book that moment when everybody's participating in this good mother myth. you, the new parent,
Mhm.
and everybody around you. So this happened to me, that my colicky newborn with undiagnosed, problems that needed medication would scream and scream. And as soon as he started to go, whoever was holding the baby would say, "Oh, he wants his mommy," and hand him right back to me. And after I had gotten like 20 seconds off, right? "Oh, he wants his mommy," telling themselves, making themselves feel better, like she'll know what to do with
Yeah.
this demon child
Yeah.
that's screaming. And of course I didn't. And I want to be like, "No, I don't know what to do. Please
Yeah.
don't give him back to me. Please,
Yeah.
you hold him while he cries for 10 minutes." But everybody was participating in this. Yes, but you have a magical knowledge
Yes. Yeah. And
that
I
only
mean,
you
I
can
think
possess.
and that's so it's a lot of these ideas I think are so deeply ingrained that it's hard to even kind of challenge them because I would just believed that I would. Like that was, that just by like virtue of having been the person to give birth, I would automatically know what to do. And when it didn't work that way, it felt really bad.
Right. Right. But
But
you weren't.
I
Go
had a
ahead.
moment like years later when my best friend had her baby, and my own kid. They're trying to think. It was like 4 maybe at that point, my younger kid. And so I was years out of the baby stage at that point, and I remember going over to her house, and he was little, and she was just like worn out, and he was crying, and she was like, "I just can't like take him. I just can't hold him anymore." And I remember picking him up, and I was kind of like, "Oh, I haven't held a baby in a while. Like, I don't know if I know what I'm doing. Like, what if I can't get him to calm down?" And then realizing like, oh, this is fine. Like, it's not fun to hold a crying baby, but when it's not your baby and you're not, like, kind of biologically and hormonally attached to them, it's not like a full body emergency in the same way that I
Ah,
experienced it with my own kid. And he, like,
right.
cried for a while and then he stopped. And it really made me think, like, man, it's kind of the opposite of this mythology we have that the mother automatically knows what to do. Like, maybe the mom is in sometimes, like, especially ill-suited to, like, handle the additional stress of a crying baby
Mhm.
on top of everything else, you know? It
Mhm.
just was such a reminder to me of, like, how much we all need help and that that's not a failing to be like, "This I cannot hold this crying kid anymore, like, somebody else needs to take him."
You're not, the new mother is not really any better at this than anybody else. But
That
everybody,
feels incredibly subversive to say, but I think it's true.
yes, but and everybody around you participates and like, "No, no, 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 but you're the one. You're the only one who can do it." And then there's another twist of the screw here you talk about in the book, that a good mother wants to do this herself.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
wants to do it
Yeah, if you're
all on
not,
her own.
like exactly, right, if you're not thrilled I mean, I knew and I do think that some people genuinely experience, like, the early baby stage this way. But I felt like so much of the messaging I was getting, from women that I knew, and especially women that I knew, but online were writing these things about like, "Oh, I just love to when he's napping, I just sit and stare at him, and I just love him, and this is all I wanna do." And that wasn't what I felt, right? I was like, "I wanna be reading a book, like, I have a dissertation to write, like, I wanna go hang out with my friends." Like, I didn't. Um, I loved my baby, and I shouldn't have to, like, say that, but I always feel like I need to clarify that. But he wasn't actually, like, the only thing that I cared about,
Yeah.
and that was surprising to me.
And that's another thing that I identified with, this sort of rush to be like, "I'm fine, I'm fine." It is the same as before. It's just with the
Yeah,
baby. With the
exactly.
baby naps, and I'm just gonna get this dissertation done and during nap time, right? That
Yeah,
I think many of us can identify with that, like, nothing has to change, and of course
I
everything has changed.
know.
And so then it's something else that you end up feeling bad about, that your focus and your brain
Yeah,
power isn't the same on 1.5
yeah.
hours of sleep as it was a couple of months ago.
It's amazing how, like, every one of these, like, kind of myths and bad ideas that we're talking about coming back to, like, and that's another reason why new moms often feel bad, you know?
Yeah. Right, right. So all of this comes to bear, I'm gonna quote you again here, the in this idea that their mother's love, which is going to happen as soon as the baby comes. Like, it's just gonna drop from above in the recovery room, right? That you're gonna be just downloaded with the program of
Yeah.
magical love, that's going to happen, and that we participate in that myth, and certainly everybody around us participates in that myth. You say this is a way to draft us into an enormous amount of unpaid and undervalued labor. for, 18 years or more.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You're going to know
Yeah.
how to do it. You're just better at it. You're the only one who really knows how. You want to do it more. You actually don't want any help. You want to do it all yourself, don't you? And you think that if there's any part of you that is saying this doesn't ring true for me, that there's something wrong with you
Mm-hmm.
instead of something wrong with that idea.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think especially for new moms who are partnered with men, like that becomes such a dividing line. Like even if, and there's research that bears this out, like even if you had had a pretty kind of egalitarian marriage, once you had a kid, unless you really consciously push back, I think against that idea that the mom just knows what to do, like the mom does a lot at first and then she kind of keeps doing it. It's really hard and really complicated. I mean, interestingly, some of the people that I know who were able to keep up like more egalitarian strands in their parenting were people who had like really complicated situations. Like I had a good friend who
Oh,
had triplets, and I think she just was like, there is no way actually that I can do all of this. And so like her husband was there, her mom moved in with them for a while, and I think like because the care of 3 babies was so clearly too much, it forced them to talk about caregiving differently. But also the care of 1 baby is too much for 1 person, you know?
right.
Like
Right. And even if you and your parenting partner are very much on the same page or want to be, like you say, like, what would help have looked like from
yeah.
you tell this very relatable story in the book of you're with the baby in the middle of the night, you're completely over attuned to every snuffle coming from the bassinet right by your bed. And your husband gets up to go to the bathroom and comes back and puts the covers over him and goes back to sleep. And the waves emanating off him of I only worry about my own needs in the
Yeah.
middle of the night. I'm not going to check on the baby while I'm up. Like it wouldn't occur to him to do that. And it's not because he's a bad person. It's because it
Yeah.
wouldn't occur to him to do that. How do you even begin to rewrite that script?
Right? I mean, like, literally, what would he have done? Like, I was sitting
What
with
would
the
he have
baby
done?
nursing. Like, I didn't, it's just it's really hard, I think, to share the work of really early parenthood,
Right.
because especially if you're nursing, right? And I do it. I also know people who have been like, nope, we are not doing that. Or we're gonna bottle feed a couple of feeds, as a way of being really intentional. But I think that I don't know, you have to do a lot of like really deliberate pushing back against cultural narratives if you're not going to fall into that trap of kind of the mom doing it, and then the mom's the one who knows how to do it. She's the one
Right.
who's attuned.
Right. And
Um,
and of course you could create a situation where by the time the baby is a couple months old, of course the baby does prefer the primary
yeah,
caregiver and only
yeah.
mommy knows how to, burp them the way they like to be burped or whatever. Like you can create that situation. It doesn't happen when the baby's 2 days old.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I've learned since then, there's a really wonderful book, Mother Brain by Chelsea
Oh
Conaboy.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
about
We had her
like,
on the show. I'm gonna
oh,
link to
she's
the
so,
interview.
yeah. So maybe everybody already knows this, but
Everybody
one of
already
the
knows. So
main
no, tell us again.
I think her book is so it really, and again, I read it many years after my own kids were babies, but it changed my own. It just did so much for me. And she talks about the idea, I think the phrase is the brain that is earned by care, like the idea that like, oh, you like caregiving changes your brain. Like the way you learn to care is actually by doing it.
Mm,
Um, so as you said, like nothing gets downloaded into your brain the second that your baby is born. Um, But you get that through practice, which means that anybody can get it through practice.
right. I'm talking to Nancy Reddy. She is the author of the new book, The Good Mother Myth, and we'll be right back. So, Nancy, let's talk about where these ideas have come from. Let's get into the research. The research that underpins most of these ideas, most of the good mother myth, who a good mother is, what she gets to do, are 75 years old. I found reading this book. I was somewhat familiar with the sort of main bodies of research that are in this book, but walk us through how tied these may be to their time and to the person creating the theory.
Sure. So I really tie like our present day kind of mythology around motherhood to the post-war period immediately after World War II. And in part, it feels like this moment in American history that could have been like really revolutionary. It could have been radical.
Mm,
During the war, there were women who were working. They were going to state-supported childcare, which, how many years later we still don't have. Um, and there was a real urgency once the war was over and male veterans returned to, get men back in the workforce and kind of get women back home. There was a lot of anxiety about, what's going to happen to marriage, what's going to happen with gender, what's going to happen to the economy, if women have taken men's jobs. And so the science that emerges around that time, and that really gets a lot of circulation, that's very popular, like with the media, all ends up kind of reinforcing this message that, what a baby really needs is the undivided attention of one primary caregiver who better be the mother.
Right.
And that also mothers will find that totally fulfilling, that it's like the kind of natural destiny of every woman. And so I got sucked into the research through Harry Harlow, who was a psychologist at the University of Wisconsin, which is where I went to graduate school. And he did these studies that probably anyone who's like taken an intro psych class, like the pictures probably are still haunting your brain because they're so upsetting, with these baby monkeys who he raised in these cages with surrogate mothers that were either wire or like terry cloth wrapped in wire. And he was trying to figure out basically like, what do babies really need? Like, how important is feeding versus comfort? And what he found with those studies is that actually comfort is even more important than food, that the babies would cling to these terry cloth mothers for hours and hours and hours a day, even when their food, like their formula, came from the wire mothers. And
so wait, so it was either a wire mother giving formula or a wire wrapped in terry cloth mother giving formula.
Yeah.
And so the ones with the wire, the monkeys with the wire mothers would sort of eat and then drop off, but the ones with the terry cloth mother would sort of cling there all the time.
Yeah. Basically, like there are a couple of different experimental conditions, but no matter which mother was the one who was doing the feeding, it wasn't the food that the babies were like attached to. It was the feeling of comfort, having something soft. They were also warmed, having something soft and warm to cling to.
So what was the ostensible, like, what's the conclusion that you're taught in your intro psych class?
Yeah. So the argument, and it was an important finding at the time. So the argument was that what a baby needs isn't just to have his kind of like technical biological needs met. It's not enough to just feed a baby. You have to also, Harlow called it love, which I find really beautiful, actually. Like, he's a very old school psychologist. He started his career studying rats. But he really believed he was studying love. So he believed that what he had found was that these babies loved their cloth mothers and that they felt loved when they were like clinging to them and feeling comforted. He did these wild studies where he would, they had like a scary like teddy bear that would make these like clapping sounds. They're really creepy looking if you watch the videos. And they would put them in the cage, and the babies would like run around and then go back and cling to their mother. And it looks like love. It looks like the babies are being comforted by their mothers. And so Harlow, and then of course lots of journalists, were really quick to leap from these baby monkeys to what that meant for human mothers, that like the image of a human mother should also be someone who was, he says, like soft, warm, patient, available 24 hours a day, that was what a human baby needed from their mother too.
And did attachment theory, which is a different researcher, but did that come out of these studies? Was that sort of where that began?
Yeah, very much so. So attachment theory is really founded by John Bowlby, who's a British psychoanalyst and psychologist. And he, along with Mary Ainsworth, developed attachment theory, this idea that like a child's relationship with their primary caregiver sets the stage for the whole rest of their life. And Bowlby had been working originally with children in England who were homeless, who were orphaned and traumatized by World War II. And he was doing studies on the kind of psychological health of those children. And a lot of that research kind of came under fire. People thought that he was, being a little too loose with his sample sizes, and that his research wasn't actually all that rigorous, and it wasn't saying necessarily what thought it was. And he found out about Harry Harlow's research with the cloth mothers and visited his lab and was like, yes, these monkeys prove the thing that I have been trying to prove about human mothers. And so he was really, they worked together a lot and really bolstered each other's careers and were able to circulate these messages about, monkey mothers and human mothers.
And the crazy thing about John Bowlby, among other of these post-World War II male researchers, is that they were complete Downton Abbey parents in their own lives, right? Like, do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
They kind of see their kids once in a while. And
yeah.
So were you surprised? Did you know that, or did you discover that when you were returning to this research?
I would say like it took me a long time to really think about when I was working on the book, and for a long time into working on the book, I was thinking about these researchers and the ideas, that they had studied, and I, knew a bit about their personal lives, from reading biographies and things. But it wasn't until pretty late in the process. And I think it was when I was reading about this year that John Bowlby spent at Stanford. And he's British. His family lives in London, but he spends a year at Stanford and he's traveling back and forth. He visits Harlow in Wisconsin. He goes to Chicago. That I thought like, oh, hey, wait, like, I thought he had kids. I thought he had like a bunch of kids. And what's he doing just like spending a year in California? And like we all know the answer to this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, like he had 4 kids actually who were, being raised at home by his wife. And, at the same time, I was able to find some of their letters. Like he's writing all these letters to her about like he's meeting all these people who are so impressed with him, and he's really like, doing. I know, like I'm kind of like, man, buddy.
And her letters.
Yeah, and she's writing.
Talk about her letters.
And she's
amazing.
writing these letters to him about like, oh, it's actually really hard. Like this is, what it's like to be raising all these kids, and they must have had some kind of help. He was very scornful of daycare. Like he actually campaigned like publicly in Britain against daycare. So they weren't like sending their kids to daycare, but I do think that they had a nanny or something. And she writes in her letters about, when the nurse comes in. When they have a new baby. So she had some help. It wasn't literally like just her with the 4 kids alone. But I mean, there's this incredible irony, doesn't even feel like a big enough word for like these men who devoted their lives and their research to telling women how to mother, and that they could do it this way and it would be easy and natural and pleasurable, who like not only didn't really raise their own kids, but also refused to listen to their own wives who were telling them like what motherhood was actually like.
They wanted to listen to the cloth mother monkey more than the letters they were getting in the mail. Like this is really difficult, and I'm struggling. Right? They just
like no, honey, no, you're great.
And so there was also in his case the bias of his own childhood, which was I think you say in the book, pretty miserable, that he was raised at an institution. So he had to grind to show the kids need mothering.
He does. I mean, he was raised, his family is kind of, as you say, like a little bit Downton Abbey, like his dad. They were not quite royalty, but they're adjacent to it. And, he's raised in a family where I think he sees his father like once a week on Sundays. His mom, like he's raised by nannies. He sees his mother for an hour, like at tea time. And the nanny who raised him left the family when he was 4, which seems to really have been traumatic for him. Like, that's genuinely was the loss of his primary caregiver. And he talked about that throughout his life. And that to me really feels like I'm sure that genuinely was traumatic. I'm not, poking any fun at that. But I think that undergirds a lot of his research in a very personal way. And my argument is really like there's a wide range between never leaving your kid with a babysitter, like not having any interests outside of raising your kid, being totally available to your kid all the time, and like leaving the home entirely and like never seeing you. Like there actually is there's a spectrum of approaches to caregiving that Bowlby seemed to not see or be interested in.
And it seems in his research and the experiment, the cloth monkey experiment, have the same flaw, which is couldn't it be some cages have a wire mother giving milk, and some cages have a wire mother giving milk and a warm cloth monkey daddy that's just kind of there and available.
Yes.
And would the monkeys cling to that? I think they probably would, right?
Yeah.
But the idea that it just never occurred to them to
Yeah.
study in their research what the presence of a
Yeah.
loving figure that doesn't breastfeed would
Yeah.
mean.
There's one really fascinating moment towards the end of Harry Harlow's first talk about his cloth mother research that kind of gets just like set off to the side, like it's not discussed as central to his research. But he says basically, like, because my research shows that nursing is not actually the most important thing, but contact comfort, like being physically available and comforting your baby. It turns out that men are just as well equipped to do this work as women are. Like, in short, exactly, right? In short, anyone can be a mother, is how a journalist kind of like, talks about it. And it's like he has this one moment of really radical, like, my research shows this isn't actually about gender, that no one picks up or like pays attention to. But imagine if in 1958 someone had seized on that message,
Right.
Like, actually, dads, you can do just as well as a mom.
Right.
But that kind of gets like
Right.
left out of
Right.
them.
If somebody could have proven that it was crucial to have
Yeah.
a parental figure. My dad grew up. His dad died at a young age, and this was, in the 50s. And his mother, he got involved in the Boy Scouts because his mother,
Mm.
my grandmother, knew that it was very important to her that he have a parental male parental influence in his life. So it was present,
Yeah.
but it was in a very like pat you on the head kind of
Yeah.
way, I suppose. That so it was envisioned as being part of the picture, but
Yeah.
once a week on Sundays maybe was enough.
As an example of like, how do we build a community around our kid? I think even for people who do have two parents, like, we actually all need more than that, right? And whether it
All
comes
need more than
through
that. Yep.
like Boy Scouts or extended family or friends who like pitch in and are part of your kids' lives, like, we actually all need more adults to be involved, I think, in our kids' lives than just, whoever's actually living in the house and raising them.
That's a really good point. And so often I think what we leave out is like we shouldn't expect mothers to do it all. And so everybody else has to start doing more, but we forget to underline because that would be better for you too,
Yes.
let alone the kid.
Like, it actually is good for everyone. I think it's so
Good for
good.
everyone. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a dear friend who I write about a lot in the book, who really has been very important to our family and very important to the kids. Anna, she and her husband are still very good friends of ours. And seeing her relationship with my kids develop over time, she just sees them differently and she notices different things about them. And that's been so important to see, just like another adult who really has an investment
Mm-hmm.
in my kids. And I think that's really good for them to feel really like seen by someone who's not their parent, but is a very important adult in their life.
I love it. I'm talking to Nancy Reddy. Her new book is The Good Mother Myth, and we'll be right back. So, Nancy, I wanted to talk about one other sort of thread of research that I thought I knew what it said, and it says something very different, which is the good enough mother. So this is what I thought it meant. I thought it meant relax, you're good enough, and good enough is good enough, and you don't have to worry about being more than good enough. You're good. That's actually not at all what its creator was going for. So explain that to us.
This always feels so tricky to talk about because I do actually think what you just said is a pretty helpful message. I think
Sure.
for a lot of people, like, don't be so hard on yourself. You're doing great. I think that the idea of good enough, even as we use it colloquially, is still tricky. I mean, for me at least, like, I don't know if I can be good enough. Maybe I can be better. Like, it introduces this idea of measurement and like assessment
Yeah.
into a relationship that I think is not actually helpful. But yeah, I mean, what I found when I really dug into the research on that is that is not what that phrase was intended to mean in its kind of like initial definition. So it comes from D.W. Winnicott, who is a pretty famous British pediatrician and psychoanalyst. And when he talks about the good enough mother, he actually is talking about a mother who's making these like incredibly minute intentional adjustments to fail her child, to like teach him that he is a being independent of her. So it actually is this really like Freudian kind of, they're separating. They start out as one unit and they're separating. It was not about like moms going easy on themselves at all, even though I think that's a useful message. Like that is not what Winnicott was talking about.
So he was
And
talking about like not loving your kids to not smothering them. Is that what he was
not
after?
necessarily not smothering them. I mean, the theory is like the kind of Freudian theory of like early infancy is that the baby basically exists as a being like in a state of merging with his mother, like does not know that he is a separate entity because ideally anytime he has a need, it's met. He doesn't really know where that comes from. He just, it's like kind of like mother baby, all one thing. And what a baby needs eventually is to individuate, to be a separate being. And so a good enough mother will like skillfully and slowly over time fail her baby a little bit, like maybe be a little slower to respond when he cries, maybe not get every single thing right. It's really just like a kind of Freudian concept about like a baby's ego development.
Okay.
Um,
It's interesting. All these men are thinking about it from the point of view of the baby, not
Yes.
the mother, right? Like, what does
Yes.
this baby me need? That's a
Exactly.
better
Exactly.
mother.
I mean, one of the historians of science who I really love, Marga Vicedo, talks about that. And she says, like, in all of this research, all of these men who are ostensibly studying motherhood, the mothers were, quote, the great absentees. Like, they're not people. They're not understood as people in this research.
And then there was another part of this good enough mother, I think, that you would take it to mean, I have taken it to mean that we're all capable, right? We're all good enough, but you're okay. But instead, Winnicott was pretty certain that motherhood was innate for most people, but some people it just was never going to work. No matter what, they wouldn't be good enough. And what kind of people did he include in that?
Right. Yeah. I mean, he has this kind of like really heartbreaking line where he says something like, most mothers have it in them to be good enough, but some mothers can't be helped. And he doesn't necessarily really elaborate on what that is, if it's something psychologically, in her failing that she doesn't have the capacity. I mean, Winnicott really believed that motherhood was like the ultimate destiny of every woman. And that even if you were a little bit ambivalent or nervous about it, that you would just get kind of subsumed, like that that pregnancy and early motherhood were just this, you just be like kind of awash in this like ocean of love for your baby. And I think he thinks that some women maybe weren't quite capable of giving themselves up in that way. And what I find really troubling about the way that those ideas have kind of seeped into our culture is this idea of selflessness, and that if you are doing it right, you'll kind of stop having a self. And I think it's really hard. I mean, I've thought a lot about like, maternal mental health, and I think it's really hard if like that's what a normal mother is doing. It's really hard to know if you need help. That doesn't sound to me like a pleasant or healthy state of things.
No, from the outside, right? Nobody would say like you've lost yourself completely
Yeah.
is the goal, but then we kind of say that in little ways, don't we?
We do. I mean, and I think that our like mythology around like getting totally swept up in your baby's needs makes it really hard to know when like, man, you could use some help, right? Like you could talk to someone, you could, it's just really hard to distinguish between a kind of normal hard time and like something where some intervention would make things better.
I'm going to give you another quote from you. You say, "We lionize mothers and their superhuman ability to do what they do and attribute it to their natural goodness rather than a lifetime of being socialized to care." I just read a whole book called Happy to Help about being socialized to be helpers.
Yes.
So this is
Yes.
right. We're socialized to care. We're not superhuman at it.
Yeah.
But the more you do selflessly, the more good you are. And the less you're able, if you're struggling, then that must mean you're not very good. At least that's what we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really hard to swallow, but I think it's true. I think it's a big
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah. I mean, it's been really helpful, and I'm sure you've thought about this a lot, to think about it through the lens of socialization, though, right? Because if I learned how to care, like, my husband can also learn how to care, and people who don't have kids can learn how to care. I think about it a lot, having boys, that so much of the presumed socialization for them is not that way, and really having to think, like, how do we teach them to attend to caring in that way? And they really do. I don't know. I mean, both of them really are very caring kids and really do, like, attend to other people's feelings. But I think that's not part of our cultural narrative of boyhood.
No. No, so, I mean, if you have a male partner or you have sons, is part of the work, not just saying, like, "Everybody else needs to help more around here," but really making sure people understand that, parenting is learned, not innate for the most part, and that anything, I'm quoting you again, anything a stretched thin mom is doing, she's had to learn how to do so somebody else can learn it too. Do we really need to just sort of walk people through this? I
Yeah.
think it's really that people don't understand this, and so we have to help them understand that this is true?
I think we both need to walk people through it, and then we also need to stop doing so much of the work by ourselves. I mean, I think we've gotten, as a culture, pretty good at, like, talking about the mental load and, like,
Mhm.
thinking about invisible labor. I mean, I see, like, Instagram graphics about that all the time.
Yeah.
And I feel like the additional step is, like, to stop doing so much of it, like, "Here is the mental load of laundry. I'm gonna explain this to you, and I'm going to, try to hand off some portion of it," or whatever the thing is. I think that
Right.
sometimes, we've gotten really good at naming these things that women more often end up doing, but I think sometimes the harder thing is to let go of doing all that work ourselves.
Or have the tough conversation, right? Because you
Yeah.
said this, and I thought, "Oh, this is true, touche," that you can share a snarky Instagram post with other people who are like, "Am I right, ladies?" And then
Yeah.
and that feels really good. It does. But it's not a substitute, as you say, for having a tough
Yeah.
conversation about what's
Yeah.
going on in your home with somebody who might really have been raised like you were with this idea that, well, you're just better at it and you just know
Yeah.
how to do these things. You have a
Yeah.
natural ability that they don't.
Yeah. I mean, how do you think about that? I just think it can be so hard, even with someone that you love, who's a good partner, et cetera, to be able to say, like, actually, I need help. I think that so many women are socialized to kind of do it all and take pride in our ability to do it all, that it
Yes.
remains really hard for me to be like, actually, no, like, I am doing too much and I need you to do more.
I
I
need
think
you to
that's
do.
really hard. I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, you must have thought about that a lot.
So yes, I'm plugging my own book now. Happy
Please
to
do.
help. I
Yeah.
do a whole essay about, like, you have to do more around here, and that I think that my family members, because I have older kids and a spouse, everybody was sort of like, "What do you mean? When you're really good at doing it all and keeping the pattern of
Yes.
life smooth and
Yeah.
undisturbed,
It's
then it's
invisible.
like it is invisible. We're so good at it. We've made it in. We've risen to the assignment." And then we're like, "I can't take it anymore," and they don't know what we're talking about,
You're like,
and
"What do
they're
you mean?"
right, but
Like,
I don't see anything that needs to be done. I'm like, "Just look, like, we're almost out of milk." It's just
yeah,
it is invisible. You have to make it visible, and you can, and you should, and you must, but it takes
yeah,
time to
yeah,
completely restructure your modes of existence. But I think this is, you underline this myth that we all participate in, that women are, that this is instilled in us magically, and we're just better at it. I think I've unlearned that for myself, but I definitely have thought it for most of my life
yeah,
that, yeah, there was just some bit of me that was better at multitasking,
yeah. I
so I
mean, it's a
couldn't miss
narrative
that
that I
much.
think can feel really good. It can feel like
Well,
a
that's
real
true.
sense of pride and
Yeah.
letting go of that, saying like, "Well, actually," I forget what I was reading. I was reading something recently where saying like, "My husband learns new skills at work all the time. Like, why is he like he could also learn how to do these things at home," which I think is a good point, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you're partnered with a competent person, they can learn how to do these things. And if not, then that's a different conversation. Um,
And again, I think to come back to the idea of, like, this is better for everybody.
yes.
This is
Yes.
it's great for kids to feel like this parent knows exactly what I need, and this parent knows exactly what I need, and the nice lady who takes care of me on Tuesdays and Thursdays, she knows exactly what I need. Like, the more loving, attentive, adults our children have in our lives, the better, in their lives, the better. It doesn't all have to be on us. It isn't better if mommy cuts their sandwich. It isn't. So
Yeah.
stop buying into that narrative.
Yeah. I mean, and that's really the big, I think, kind of like takeaway from the book, right? Is that instead of trying to focus on being like one perfect mom who can do everything, like what our kids actually need and what we actually need is like lots of people who are loving our kids and like showing up.
I mean, you can tell, guys, I loved this book. It's called The Good Mother Myth by Nancy Reddy. Nancy, tell us about you and your work and the book and everywhere we can find you.
I am on Instagram at nancy.o.reddy. And I also write a newsletter called Write More, Be Less Careful. That's nancyreddy.substack.com. That is especially interested in maintaining a creative practice if you have kids or are doing other kinds of caregiving and really like making space for your creative work, even in the middle of a busy life. So
Oh
you'd
my
be welcome to join
gosh.
us there too.
I will be subscribing to that. And the book is called The Good Mother Myth. I will link to that in the show notes. You can get it wherever you buy books. Nancy, thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thank you so much for having me.